Prepare to experience the strongest radio allowable by law. Secrets will be revealed. Myths dispelled. From the studio gym where excuses never apply, it's Superhuman Radio with your host, Carl Lenore.
Welcome back to another episode of Superhuman Radio. Today is May 19th as the month ticks away, 62 days into lockdown, partial lockdown, quarantine, whatever you want to call it, social distancing due to coronavirus. And looks like we're going to be coming out of it pretty soon. June 1st, the gym's open, and I will be able to start feeling like I'm not 62 years old anymore. Look at this. Jeff Clifton just said, Superhuman Radio Live, one of the two reasons I keep Facebook. Thank you, brother. That's a very sweet thing for you to say. We have a great show today. We are surrounded by neurodegenerative diseases today, both central nervous system and peripheral nervous system, between people with neuropathies and fibromyalgias and all these other things, and also Parkinson's disease, multiple sclerosis, and the list goes on and on. And these issues are rampant in society today. And there are things causing them. There's no doubt about it. But in order to discover your truth and what's causing it for you, you have to be able to assess what makes it worse and what makes it better. And we're going to give you a tool today to do that. And we're going to give you a price point that if you say no to, you just don't care. And so then we can get past that. You can stop saying, gee, I wish I can get better, because you really don't care about getting better. Because we're going to give you a price point today that no one can say no to. A deal that only is available here at Superhuman Radio. Before we do that, I have to give credit to my title sponsor, who pays a generous amount of money to be the title sponsor of this show, because they believe in the mission of this show. And that's Legendary Foods. If you go to eatlegendary.com and use the code SHR10, you'll save 10% off everything at the website. And that is seasoned nuts, delicious, decadently delicious, but no sugar nut butters. You'll swear you're eating sugar, but you're not. Like Elisa says, you'll swear you're cheating, but you're not. And then, of course, their Tasty Pastry, which is a Pop-Tart upgraded with 9 grams of protein, less than 1 gram of fat, 3 to 4 impact carbs, keto-friendly, low-carb friendly, and give them to your kids because they don't have to know that they're good for them. Put them in their lunchbox as soon as school starts back. So check them out, show them some love and appreciation for them being the major sponsor of this show. I'm going to bring my guests on now, see if I can do this with poise like a real producer. So we're being joined today by two people who've been on my show before. The first is Bob Dennis, Dr. Bob Dennis, who came on my show and blew the lid off of all of the misinformation that we have about PEMF. And to this day, I still get compliments about that show by people who thought they knew what PEMF did and what it didn't do. And then, of course, Dr. Mark Tommerdahl, who was on my show not too long ago, talking about brain health, but from more of a position of recovering from workout to workout and being the best self you can. But the reality is that a lot of us may not care about brain health if we think we're doing fine. And that's where in lies the real problem. So I want you first, Dr. Tommerdahl, to talk about the realities of being able to assess your brain's ability to function by using your brain to assess its ability to function, please.
Yeah, absolutely. This is actually something that Bob and I talk about all the time. We talked about it on we co-host a show called Grumpy Science. And basically it's, we're a couple of grumpy old guys, and we get off on topics like this where we start talking about how people have really poor self-perception of, basically using self-perception as a tool for saying how good are they. And it's a little bit like saying how good your weight loss program's going without weighing yourself or measuring yourself in any way. And, as you get more and more old and addled, and you might think you're doing fine, but you're really not. Because the thing you're using to measure it with is your own brain, and that's really not really a good tool. When it starts to fail. But you might feel great. Might feel great when you take opiates, but that tool is not really at top notch when you're taking opiates, because it's basically the self-perception's gone down quite a bit.
Well, actually, so I've noticed this myself. I'll be 62 next month. And I'm definitely, especially with not training for almost 2 months, I feel old right now. It'll come right back. I know that. But one of the things I've noticed, let's take sleep, for instance. Let's say I have 2 really crappy nights of sleep. So let's say this was my baseline before 2 crappy nights of sleep. Those 2 crappy nights of sleep, they end up pushing me all the way down here. Right? So now I'm like down here and I feel crappy, but I only go back up after a couple good nights of sleep, 50% of where I was before. That feels good to me. I'm like, oh, I'm back to normal, when I'm really not. I'm not, because our body and our brain adjusts for the new normal. That's what it does, because it wants you not to sit still and in place. It wants you to continue on. Bob, you're nodding your head, Doc. Talk about that.
Well, sometimes physiologically, sometimes you're set up to detect a level of something, and sometimes you're set up to detect a change. And you're talking about how the brain is pretty good at picking up on short-term changes. Like, I feel better than I did yesterday. But that doesn't tell you where you are on an absolute scale, right? That's what you're saying, and that's totally correct.
Right. And so this is why, in order to conquer a neurodegenerative disease, you can't just go by, man, I feel great today. Oh, I felt like crap 3 days ago. Because, and I'm going to give an illustration, then we're going to move past this. I've talked about this on the show so many times over the past 14 years, I can't bookmark when I've talked about it. But I've always talked about how the brain doesn't have a little brain that sees what's going on in the big brain. This is not a penis joke, by the way. And so, this is a reality of people who wake up in the middle of the night and they wake up in a panic state. And the first thought that their brain grabs onto was that event that happened yesterday in their life. They say, oh, I understand why I woke up last night. It's because of the stress of that event. Not true. 99% of the time, if you have nightmares or you have awakenings in the middle of the night where you're panicked, wide awake, adrenalated, you just came out of a hypoglycemic episode. Your brain started to panic. It's going, wow, blood sugar's dropping. How do we wake this idiot up so the adrenal glands will liberate glycogen from the liver so that we can feel good again? So the brain panic, number one. But then number two, the brain's role is to assign meaning and symbiology to things, because that's how we bookmark events. Oh, dogs bite, stay away from dogs, stoves are hot. Well, when the brain feels panic, it just assigns the most recent thing that you felt panicked about. And so you wake up and you go, oh, I must be waking up because I'm stressed out about work. No, you could have slept right through that had you not had a hypoglycemic episode. This is a perfect example in an actual situation that a lot of people will go, wow, that's what's happening to me. Because your brain doesn't have a brain watching what it does, because it is the mechanism that's assessing at the same time regulating.
Yep.
Right. We talk about this. Boiling frog syndrome is a classic thing where you have this long, slow change that you really don't notice. But then all of a sudden, you throw a frog in a pot of boiling water, and slowly turn up the heat, and it won't even notice that it's being boiled. It's the same thing with your brain. If you have these long-term slow changes, you don't measure them, you can't tell that there's anything wrong.
So we are in a world where there's a bumper crop of neurodegenerative diseases. You and I, Dr. Tommerdahl, talked about multiple sclerosis and symptoms of spasticity in the legs, lack of feeling, and so on and so forth. And some people aren't even being diagnosed with MS. They're just being told they have an autoimmune disorder. But so many people have these issues today, and they don't think about it as a neurodegenerative disease, but in fact it is, isn't it?
It is. They basically are. And there's a lot of environmental factors, a lot of, basically, and there's ways to get things better. But you really, when you start doing things, I've met people who tried to do different things to get their neurodegenerative disorders turned around, and they would try different things for a couple of days, and they say, yeah, but it didn't work. They change their diet and say, oh, that didn't work. But if they had been measuring, or sometimes when they do measure, they find out there is a slow change, and they say, oh, I actually am improving. And then they continue with whatever change that they've made in their lifestyle and or treatment. And then that slow change goes in a positive fashion as well.
So will the brain gauge, the device that you and Dr. Dennis have pioneered here, which actually allows people to sit at a table with a laptop or a desktop computer and do anytime, 5 times a day if they choose to, what it takes hundreds of thousands of dollars of lab equipment to do, which is assess a variety of skills, let's say, that the brain can be measured on. Will it make your brain better just by doing it?
That's a little bit like saying, if I want to measure how strong you are, will lifting weights tell me that? And it's like, well, okay, if you go and you lift weights, and then we have a pretty good assessment of how strong you are. But if you lift weights once a year, then every year we can tell how strong you are. If you lift weights twice a week, 3 times a week, you're probably going to get a little stronger. Now, there aren't any practice effects with the brain gauge but there's some tests you can actually get better on. Like, for example, the simple reaction time test, which a lot of people do, it's actually considered a speed drill. And you force yourself to do something as quickly as possible. And that actually helps improve different brain functions. It improves your information processing speed. If you do that a lot, if you do it 2-3 times a week, that's going to improve your performance. And, thinking faster is probably a good thing. Just being faster in general makes your brain health better. This is something that is tried and true in many athletic venues. When I trained, we did speed drills all the time. So,
Dr. Dennis, so theoretically, using the brain gauge to assess a baseline functionality of my brain on several different skill sets, then
right.
I can look back and see what changes I make in my life. That could be my sleep, it could be my diet, it could be whatever. And then I can go back and test again and go, oh, that helped or that didn't help. Isn't that really where the value is, Dr. Dennis?
Exactly. That's the value. And so what we call it a tuning curve. And so sometimes you might say, hey, if I take 2 shots of espresso in the morning, my brain is really hopping, looks really good. If I take 4, I feel okay, but my brain function is actually getting worse. So
I want to stick with go ahead.
There's the other simple thing of, essentially biofeedback, right? I mean, to a certain extent, I mean, you're doing something and you're getting feedback. So just the fact that you're closing that loop and you're getting knowledge about what your actions are, whatever those things are, nutraceuticals, exercises, meditation, whatever, just the knowledge of the fact that you're headed in the right direction instills confidence. Or, knowledge of the fact that it's not helping you, let you put your energy somewhere else. So I think it's a pretty complicated feedback loop that we're talking about. But the point of the brain gauge is that it gives you that tool. It gives you the ability to get feedback. It would be just like if you were lifting weights and you had no idea, if somebody blacked it out and you had, in the dark, and you were lifting weights in the dark, and you had no idea even how much weight you were lifting, it would be that much harder to train, right? I mean, just getting a visual feedback, knowing, hey, I got 2 45-pound plates on there and blah, 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 that makes a difference. And knowing, and you having a brain gauge where you can actually say, I am getting better. And it is kind of fun to see my numbers get better. And it is cool to know that what I'm doing is helping me. That by itself, it at the very least, it gives you the incentive to continue on, which is the number one thing you need to do when you're training, right? I mean, it's the number one thing you need to do when you're exercising.
It also confirms it also, if you can confirm what you're doing is working, then you have the confidence to continue on.
That's my point.
That's the other thing.
you have the confidence and you feel like you got the payback. You feel like, hey man, I benched this amount for the first time. I got my 200 millisecond reaction time back for the first time. And 10, 20 years. I got, but you got to know those things. It just really helps to know what your performance is. And in many areas, you can know your performance very easily by how many plates you're slapping on, how big the dumbbells are you're lifting, timing yourself in a sprint. But getting brain function has not really been something that has been possible up until now. So this is a way for you to know.
So I want to mention something, why biohacking your brain without direction or feedback can actually hurt, not help you. So I've given up caffeine completely, cold turkey, almost 3 months ago. But 2 weeks ago, I didn't sleep well, and I thought, well, I've given up caffeine for 3 months now. I'm going to pick up a Bang energy drink on the way to the studio. And Bang is very strong. It's got, 200 or 300 milligrams of caffeine anhydrous in it. It has some other methylxanthines in it. So it's a really, okay. So I took that drink, and this speaks to something that you talk about, Dr. Tommerdahl, about that curve, that reaction curve, So right. I took that drink, and for the first hour, I was just in the zone. Everything was working great. Yeah. But then all of a sudden, I felt kind of weird, and I can't explain how scary this happened. What happened? I actually called Elisa, my producer. So I had spent 2 hours preparing a show that morning. When I came back to look at the show, I thought, that's not the show I'm doing. I had a moment that only could be described as dementia. I looked at the show and I said, that can't be the show that I'm doing today. Wasn't I doing a different show? I spent 2 hours doing all the graphics and everything. I completely didn't recognize all the work I had done for 2 hours. Like I got scared. I got, what's wrong with me? So I called Elise. I said, what show am I doing today? And she said, you're doing the da show. I said, okay. And I hung up and I looked at it and I thought, what's going on? It took about 20 minutes. I felt anxiety. I felt this sense of being frozen, my brain being frozen. Now, you talk about that, right? You wake up in the morning, your reaction time is slow. As you get through the day, it starts to pick up because you wake up. But if you become too revved up, it gets slow again, doesn't it?
Gets slow again, right? You get too revved up and your focus gets poor is another thing we can measure. But your focus, your inability to attend goes down, and you get hyper aroused, and you can no longer do the test. So it is performance based, but it gets much worse when when it rolls off. So don't know if it leads to dementia every time, but
so no, it wasn't dementia, obviously, but I had a scary moment where exactly what you said, I became so hyper aroused that I couldn't connect recent memories. And they always assign recent memory storage with dementia. And it made me think about dementia in a different way. It's like I had enough caffeine to power a small city. Why wasn't I connecting these thoughts? Why did I look at something I spent 2 hours working on and not recognize it? That was a scary moment for me. And that's when I realized no more caffeine. I'm not going to do that experiment again. So Jeff Clifton says he has a EEG feedback through his Muse headbands, but it varies daily. I can't get a longitudinal look. Can you talk about that as compared to
Well, with the brain gauge, you do get a longitudinal look. I mean, it's basically the big strength of the brain gauge is that it allows you to track your brain health history. And the brain gauge, what we do with the brain gauge is we deliver multiple tests. And that's one thing that's pretty different from most other methods, is that we are testing multiple functionality. It is a performance task, but there's multiple performance tasks. And each one is connected to a different mechanism, a different feature of brain information processing. So, and then when you combine all those, that's what gives you the overall measure of brain health. And that overall brain health can be tracked longitudinally. And that's really the most useful part, is actually, and then you can break it down. And if you see that your scores going down, it might be just one of the scores that's driving all the others. and you can actually look at that and see, well, what exactly is the mechanism that's been influenced the most.
So Ivo Sue is asking me if I think it was too much glutamate. It could have been, absolutely. But GABA, I've experimented with GABAs. I had a bad event recently with taking way too much glycine, and GABA became too predominant in my brain, and it hurt my memory because my brain literally felt sluggish. I felt tired all the time from the neck up, and I had to stop using high doses of GABA before bed. But there's a fine line between the supplementation and the effect on the memory. So
right. A big part of the brain, like to address the last question about why is GABA effective with anxiety? That's simply because sometimes GABA, basically the brain is constantly it's all about balance between excitation and inhibition. It's trying to achieve homeostasis and trying to achieve that balance between what turns things on and what turns things off. GABA plays the lead role in turning things off. And if you get hyperactive, if you've got too much, anxiety is one of the symptoms of hyperactivity in the brain. And you can either get hyperactivity from, too much excitation or not enough inhibition. And, additional GABA will cause more inhibition.
So I want to, for those of you listening to the show or watching it live, listening live, if you go to the website gaugeyourbrain.com, you can actually get the brain gauge for the first time ever. This is only for my audience for $29.95 a month, and you can cancel at any time. We had the deepest discount on the brain gauge. It was $150 off. But given the fact that so many people are concerned about work and income and everything else, the folks at Brain Gauge Corticometrics have decided to do this and test it with my audience. If you think the brain gauge could help you, and I don't know anyone it can't help, because we have people that are developing dementia in their 40s today. If they had a brain gauge that they could start tracking their brain's progress, adding things in, removing things, and looking how that affects them, they could actually get on track to make progress and reverse a lot of these problems. And $29.95 a month, I mean, come on, you probably spend more than that on movies, on Netflix or what's the other one? Prime Video. Go to gaugeyourbrain.com, select the monthly plan, $29.95 a month, no long-term contract, cancel at any time. But please, your brain is everything. If you could be ripped to shreds, you could be super, super fit, but if your brain caves in before your body does, you're going to spend your time in an institution staring at a wall until you stop breathing. And this is a problem in today's society. It really, really is. You just have to look around at all the people that are developing dementia, Parkinson's disease, multiple sclerosis is through the roof. These are all avoidable, but the only way you can avoid them is you have to be able to gauge how well your brain is working, change things in your environment, and then see what effect that has. That's the only way, because your reality for your brain health is very different than mine, and very different than Dr. Tommerdahl's, and very different than Dr. Dennis's. So this is an amazing opportunity. It sounds like the brain gauge is a functional tool that provides objective evidence of improvement. I would say that's true, right?
I agree. It's a functional tool. It's performance-based. And what that means is, like, what are performance measures? It's like how fast you run a mile, how fast you can sprint, how much weight you can lift. Those are all functional measures of physical health. And there's really, that functional measure is very elusive to obtain passively, like strapping on electrodes on your head. It doesn't always tell you how well your brain is functioning. It's really what a lot of people might want. They might say, oh, you can just, can we just read how well your brain's doing without you performing? But actually, you're going to have to answer the questions. It's a little bit like reading an eye chart. You have to look at a eye chart and actually read back what is on that eye chart to say how well your eyes are functioning. And that's sort of the strength of it, is it tells you functionally how well things are working.
So I happen to know that I have very good reaction time. I think Dr. Dennis will get a kick out of this one too. So when we watch TV, I only record shows on my DVR. so that I can watch what I want for the hour that I spend at night watching TV.
That's what I do.
When I fast forward, when I fast forward through the commercials, I watch for the TVMA or the TV14, and I know the show is coming back on, and I hit that button. And somewhere in a room, the cable company sat a bunch of people and had everybody do this, and they figured out the average reaction time of the average person out there so that they wouldn't go too far into the show and have to start rewinding it. So whenever I do it, I have to watch a good 15 seconds of the commercial because I am so fast that it backs me up into the middle of the commercial before it picks up. And I figured most people probably hit that button and go, oh, great, I'm right on the money. It's exactly where the show starts. Any ideas about that, Dr. Dennis?
Well, the funny thing is I was thinking exactly the same thing yesterday. I actually have to go one Mississippi before I press the button because otherwise I'll watch an ad. You know what I'm saying? You know exactly what I'm saying. So if you're that's one thing, and so this kind of brings us back to this point. If you're paying attention to your performance, like if you're paying attention to, your physical fitness, you're much more able to do something about it as small changes start to occur. If you're paying attention, without getting too much anxiety about it, if you're paying attention to your reaction time, you're more likely to notice when it's falling. And by the way, that's a very clever way to measure it. I also pay attention to when I drop something, am I able to just scoop it up and pick it up before it falls to the ground? Different things like that. I am always paying attention to that kind of stuff. But, paying attention is half of the problem, right? And some things you can measure and some things you just can't easily measure, like neuroplasticity. I mean, that one's a little bit, that's kind of indirect. So what Mark and I did with the brain gauge, the whole thing was, what do people need to know about how well their brain is performing? And can we give them that number? Now, a lot of people, there is going to be a lot of people seeing how quickly they can time it. But I always go like, how you can go fast forward, the double fast, triple fast. I always go triple fast. I still have to give myself a one Mississippi, so I'm paying attention there. But I also happen to know my actual reaction time because I use the brain gauge, right? And I happen to know that it's as low as a healthy athletic person would be, because we're measuring it properly and paying attention to it. So, it's good to do those kinds of tests. And it's good to have a general awareness, but it's also really good to have a way to measure it, because there are some things you just can't really put your finger on indirectly. I'll throw one at you: blood pressure, right? There's something you need to have a number. And you need to be paying attention to it. And you can pay attention all you want to, maybe the secondary symptoms of what's going on. But, it's like the silent killer, right? If you're not paying attention, if you're not measuring
most people can't tell. They can't tell at all.
Most people cannot tell at all, right? It's not like we're sitting around doing the Valsalva maneuver. Yeah, I can tell, I got some pressure. No, it's not like that at all. It's something you got to measure. And these brain functional metrics are things, if you really want to be on top of your brain function, these are things you have got to measure. And that's what we do with the brain gauge. That's what it's all about. And Mark and I are too old. We're too old and too grumpy to BS around about it. It's just the real deal. It's just right at you.
We're gonna take a quick commercial break. When we come back, we got questions and comments that are loading up from the listeners. Carrie Kruger is watching live from Pretoria, South Africa. I promised her a shout out if she showed up, and I know she's here today. But we're going to take a quick commercial break. When we come back, we're going to pick up with more of this discussion. We'll give the offer again. Also, later in the show, I started using GHK, the copper peptide that we talked about on the Pep Talk the other day. And I'm already noticing some things, and I'll share that information with you guys too. So stay tuned. You're watching and listening to Superhuman Radio. We'll be right back. Ever wish there was a precise way to gauge your recovery from workout to workout? Or wonder if the money you're spending on your nootropic supplements are actually improving brain function? Maybe you're aging and you're noticing some changes in memory. Wouldn't being able to really test your brain be of great value? Well, now you can with great accuracy with the Brain Gauge. The Brain Gauge lets you test essential components of brain health and track your brain health history, and all in the comfort of your own home. Go to GaugeYourBrain.com and use code SHR for $150 off this amazing device. That's GaugeYourBrain.com and SHR for $150 off. Do you remember those delicious toaster pastries you had when you were a kid? You know, the rectangular sugar-filled snacks? Well, guess what? Legendary Foods has just made low-carb toaster pastry. This is the first of its kind, and honestly, these things are amazing. They have 3 to 4 net carb, less than 1 gram of sugar, and 9 grams of protein. You can eat them right out of the wrapper or lightly toast them. The only question is, which flavor? Strawberry or brown sugar cinnamon? They're available at eatlegendary.com and Amazon. Imagine if you had a digital twin, one that you could compare your own health and fitness outcomes to, one that showed you whether or not the things you're doing, food you're eating, or drinks you're drinking are actually working for you or against you. Well, now you can. The first ever advanced epigenetic saliva test that compares 20 million different data points of your DNA to help predict what is aging you faster or keeping you younger is being introduced to my audience at a 70% discount from the normal price. Go to seeds.md/epigenetic-test today to learn how to get your own digital twin that will help you take the steps to live longer and stay stronger. Don't wait, because this is a limited time offer not available anywhere else. Once these tests are gone, they're gone. Again, go to seeds.md/epigenetic-test today to learn more.
Men and women, you've heard about hormone optimization. Do you feel like it's something you want to look into? RenewLifeRx.com is the place to start. Their doctors can help you with the solutions. RenewLifeRx.com has a simple process for lab work, consultation, and taking a deep dive into where your hormone levels can be improved. Superhuman Radio listeners get 30% off your initial lab work and consultation. Go to RenewLifeRx.com to schedule your no-obligation phone consultation today. Feel younger, get in better shape, and be more productive at RenewLifeRx.com.
Quest Nutrition makes bars, cookies, chips, and pizzas out of complete dairy-based proteins. Our products minimize net carbs and sugar without sacrificing taste. Each delicious chocolate-flavored chip, cookie chunk, and crunchy crumble is custom-made to maintain Quest macros. It's time to enjoy foods that work for you, not against you. It's time to enjoy your Quest.
This is the Superhuman Channel, doing reps with the weight of the world.
Welcome back. Dr. Dennis has one of my favorite toys in the whole world. In fact, I have the same exact inversion table. The greatest thing.
Yeah, sorry, I was doing a little bit of exercise there, trying to get the blood going.
There you go. Yeah, I love that for brain health too. You know, inverting is good for brain health. Very, very good.
I was just doing push-ups and stuff. Yeah.
Good for you. Excellent. Okay, so let's move on to another topic, and that is sensory discrimination. This is one of the things that the Brain Gauge uses to assess brain function. Talk about sensory discrimination and why it's important.
Okay, so sensory discrimination is a way that we probe brain function. So basically, anytime you want to figure out how something works, this is just a basic engineering approach. You have inputs and outputs. So how do we get those inputs in? Well, the way a lot of the web-based people type, if you were to go in and do a search for brain function testing, you get a whole bunch of things, and basically people ask you questions. You would read the questions and answer them, and that's not really specific. So anybody just using their own common knowledge would say, well, how would you take inputs and direct them exactly where you want them to go? And it turns out what we do is we direct those inputs by delivering very precise stimuli to the skin, and we can activate different places in the brain. Now, what is sensory discrimination? That's basically those sensory stimuli that we deliver to the fingers, and we activate with specific frequencies and amplitudes, places that are either side by side in the brain, and have those places talk to each other. And then the questions that we ask are really simple. Which of the two stimuli are bigger? That is a sensory discrimination task. Which one came first? Which one lasted longer? So the questions are never very difficult. But the way that we get at brain function is by making the task with the actual stimuli get more complicated. But the questions are always easy. And, as far as the user goes, now they may have trouble answering because each time it's like I mentioned, it's like an eye chart. Starts out very easy. And as you progress through the process, it gets a little bit harder. And it should get harder at some point because that's where you find your threshold. And that tells you basically how well is your brain communicating based on how those different inputs going to different parts of the brain are talking to each other. It's important because that's a way to objectively measure brain function. And, that's basically been the whole name of the game since we started this 15 years ago, was trying to come up with an objective.
What if you're a laborer and you've developed, calluses? What if you're a guitar player and you've developed calluses on your fingers? Will that skew the value of the information to any degree?
Well, there were traditional sensory testing people for about 50 years before we got into this game. We're very, very focused on very, very tiny stimuli. Okay, and so the difference between peripheral nervous system and central nervous system is that the main thing that we care about is what's going on in the brain. We really don't care about what's going on in the fingertips. So what traditional sensory testing does, and this is tactile testing in particular, what they do is they focus on the minimum stimulus you can feel. So that's usually like in the 5 to 10 micron range. And I know those numbers mean nothing to anyone, but keep in mind the minimum stimulus that we give in these tests is 200 microns. So while everybody else was looking at this difference, they'd say, oh, we're going to study people and we're going to find out that one group of people, with healthy brain function might measure something at 5 microns. Somebody else might feel it at 6. Okay, so the noise on that is incredible. I mean, you make a micron's. What's a micron, Bob? Thickness of your hair?
There's like 7 microns in a red blood cell. That's a good 7 microns across one red blood cell. Yeah, there's many in a human hair.
Yeah.
So unlike a hearing test where the vibration is getting lighter and lighter and lighter, you're delivering a vibration from the device that will absolutely stimulate everybody's fingertips, regardless of what sensitivity issues they have. But it's the duration and the space in between, if you will, or the fingers that it's stimulating, not the amplitude of the vibration.
Yeah, let me say that's.
Well, it's the amplitude.
Well,
go ahead,
let me say that the difference here is that we're not testing your threshold sensitivity. We're not testing your nerves in your hand. We're just blowing past those with a plenty big signal, and then the test is how is that signal processed in your brain. So that's what makes it different.
Right. I'm looking. I thought I had an image. I did have an image. I will get it during the next segment of the device, but it basically looks like a mouse, like a computer mouse, and it's got 2 little orange buttons. It looks like eyes. It looks like the mouse has 2 eyes, and you just lay your fingertips on those 2 orange buttons. And then you watch the prompts from the monitor and the software, and it walks you through a test. The entire test will take about 20 minutes, but you can test just for certain things if you want very quickly, correct?
Correct. A lot of times people say, oh, I tested pretty well on everything except this one test. Say the reaction time's slow. And say, okay, so they can just do that reaction time test over and over and over. And, like every day they might test just reaction time and one other test, or you basically have a battery of tests. Each test takes a couple of minutes and you select which of the tests that you want to take. You can take all of them. We recommend all of them for a baseline. And if you want to but if it looks like there's just a couple of things that need work, then that's something that you can do, is just take those 1 or 2 tests to keep it short.
So the word neuroplasticity means a lot of things to a lot of people. Many of us, because the word plasticity, malleable, malleability implies like actual construction going on in the brain, if you will. And that may actually be what's happening. But when we look at reaction time, first of all, does it give us an indicator of neuroplasticity? And isn't neuroplasticity just getting better and better at a task?
Not sure I understand the question.
Okay. Does reaction time an indicator is reaction time an indicator of neuroplasticity? If your reaction time continues to get better. Okay.
No. Let me give you a definition of plasticity. There's a lot of different definitions, and these actually vary with what type of neuroscientist you might be. So I'm going to violate everybody's definition. So one thing is plasticity. One reason that you put clothes on in the morning and you forget about them, you don't feel them right after you put them on, is because of habituation. That's sort of a long-term plasticity or habituation. You put on your shirt, you don't think twice about it after that. And then but adaptation or plasticity, that takes place on milliseconds, seconds, hours, days, weeks. There's all different types, and there's many different mechanisms. But you can, because it's sort of the fractal nature of it, you can measure it at different levels. And we typically measure it on the sub-second level, between 500 milliseconds and a little longer. And that's how we measure how quickly can you adapt to your environment, how quickly, does your brain sort of think, okay, all I care about is change. And that's what we're doing. You adapt to something, and then you say, okay, then deliver a change from that and see how well your brain changes, or how well you adapt to that quick fix. But that's basically the way you're wired, is to always look for the new things. And so that's what we measure. Reaction time, and what does reaction time tell us? It's basically, reaction time tells you a lot. One, it tells you a little bit about myelin health and white matter health. It tells you, about information processing speed. It does tell you about connectivity in general. And there's a lot of things that affect reaction time. And we've written about this. We have a lot of information about this on our website. But you can read papers where people have talked about martial arts and or dark chocolate improving reaction time. Caffeine can improve reaction time, and it can also make it worse. And using the reaction time test, you can also measure something called reaction time variability. In other words, when you get a test for reaction time, you don't do it just once. I mean, in other words, we deliver a stimulus and you respond to it. And let's say if you responded to it the exact same way every time, say if each time you responded, your reaction time was 200 milliseconds, you were 200, 200, 200, 200. You're very, very consistent. That means your reaction time variability is extremely low. That means your attention level, your ability to focus, is extremely good. So your focus measure would be very good. Now, if your reaction time variability is all over the place, like if first time you tested, you were 220, next time you're 200, next time 180, next time 280, next time 160, but it still averages out about the same. But your reaction time variability, your focus, that means you're having trouble attending and focusing. And, that's very common with ADHD. ADHD, people have very, very high reaction time variability, even though their reaction time is not that bad. It's usually just their variability is very high. So we get a lot of information out of each measure. It's not just the one measure, but we look at how people respond as well as what their response is.
Dr. Dennis, I want to throw a question directly to you because you're the PEMF guy. So what effects do PEMF type devices have on the brain? Are they good? Are they bad? Does it vary by frequency? Talk about PEMF and the brain.
Well, that's sort of like saying, what effect does food have on the brain? Is it good? Is it bad? Food. I mean, seriously, food's important, right? Do we have too much, too little? It depends on the type and the quantity and the frequency of when you have it, right? I mean, glucose isn't necessarily bad unless you have glucose all the time and you've got insulin up all the time, So it's very much more complex. Saying PEMF is a lot like saying the word chemicals or food.
Yeah.
So you got to
There's
be
such a
really
variety.
specific. Yeah, you got to be really specific. So I put a YouTube video up about a year and a half ago talking about the electromagnetic spectrum. Okay, like where are you on the electromagnetic spectrum? And it's even more it's way more complicated even than that. Like you could say, well, like where's the color pink on the visual spectrum? And it's not really there because it's a combination of different colors. Same thing with the color brown. You can't find it on the color spectrum, on the visual spectrum, because it's a combination of things. And so PEMF isn't just some frequency on the spectrum. It's way more complex than that. It's a combinations of frequencies and harmonics and things like this. And so I go into this, and it takes like half an hour to just to talk about the basics. There are areas in the electromagnetic spectrum that are very, very essential for life. Let's talk about a few of them. Visual range, just to be able to see. Near infrared. We have body sensation of heat. We directly experience that wavelength as heat. Okay, it's an important thing, radiated heat. Part of the electromagnetic spectrum is involved in neural transmission and the way that excitable tissues work and voltage gated channels and everything in the body. So there's some electromagnetism that's essential for life. And then there are some that's just harmless, might be beneficial. And then there's some that's really harmful, right? Like ionizing radiation. Like, nobody goes out and sunbathes to get, gamma radiation unless you're Spider-Man or something. So,
Right.
or the Hulk, right? I mean, so you want to, you got to be real specific about what you're talking about. And too much is too much.
Okay. So let me be more specific. Let's say there's these PEMF devices. I think I shared with you that I've been using the Earth Pulse unit for 14 years now. That are programmable. I find I get more deep sleep when I'm down around 3 hertz at about 50% of that magnet's power. And I actually used a EMF device, and it's about 1.5 Gauss coming through my mattress. Is that my imagination, or is it really influencing sleep?
Well, my guess would be it's really real. But here's the thing. As far as I can tell, and I've done the math, okay, if you really want to look at this, for every single known chemical species, there are about 200 million different ways to do PEMF. And there's, 8 or 10 or 12 or 20 million known chemical species in the universe. So it's not unreasonable to say that PEMF is about 200 million times more complex than all of chemistry. Okay. So the problem is that in medicine, we don't have even the smallest clue what most chemicals do to us in terms of our sleep or our health. Most chemicals have never been tested for safety or anything like that. There's only a small number. So it's really hard to say. And PEMF has enjoyed less than 1% of the research that chemicals have had on health. Way less than 1%, probably 1/10,000th or 100,000th of the amount of research. And yet it's 200 million times more complex than chemistry. So the answer to your question is we don't have any clue. I mean, that's the real answer. I mean, so this
no one wants to admit that because they want to sell PEMF units.
Everybody wants to talk about how much they know, but when you talk to somebody who really has looked at this and really thought about it, the overwhelming thing you get is, gosh, there are a lot of papers on PEMF. We don't really see, if you're using reasonable PEMF at a reasonable intensity, you really don't see any negative side effects. But man, we don't know anything about why it works. We just don't. So if you got some salesmen, shiny teeth, telling you all about they have some secret science about how PEMF works, your red flags should go straight up. The BS flags should go up, and you should be just like, this dude doesn't know what he's talking about. He's just a marketer. And that's That's the reality of PEMF.
Well, would
On
you
the other hand-
before we take this next break, would you agree that we did evolve under the influences of some type of electromagnetic pulse emanating from the Earth, and it somehow played a role in our evolution? Would you agree with that?
I would say that we have adapted to both need and utilize our entire electromagnetic environment. So some of that comes from the Earth in the form of heat. Literally, the Earth radiates heat. So there's no doubt whatsoever. I mean, if you're a caveman, you're sleeping in a cave because the cave radiates heat internally. I mean, you know, human evolution, probably the evolution of everything on Earth, is dependent upon the electromagnetic interaction of the Earth and the sun and everything else. So I think that's beyond question. The thing is, we don't really understand all of that. And like I said,
we act like we do. It's just like the microbiome. We really don't know anything about the microbiome, but there are people out there proposing that this is what you need to do, and that's what you need to do.
And, you know, some of it's good anecdotal evidence. I mean, you know, the thing is that we can say things about PEMF like, yeah, you know, if you do certain things that are generally, roughly, you know, spitballing it roughly right, it can accelerate healing by a factor of 2 or 3. It can reduce inflammation. I've got tests from a third-party GLP, FDA recognized laboratory that's the result of PEMF when I apply it to rodents anyway. You get vast reductions in inflammation. I mean, these are real things. We don't understand why, but the whole PEMF world has bullshitted. If you don't mind me using a technical term.
You can say that. Go ahead.
They bullshitted the consumer into believing that, well, if they can act like they know some science, you know, then maybe we can squeeze them for $5,000 or $10,000, and that's what that's all about. The reality is, we do know that some things work. We do know that it doesn't seem to be harmful. We do know that there are great benefits for PEMF. We really don't know why. So right now we're still screwing around in the dark, you know, and we're sort of collecting a bag of mushrooms, you know, in a dark room. We're like, well, this one looks pretty good, you know, this, you know, and that's where we're at on PEMF. Unfortunately, I wish I could say more. I wish I could say the science is something you can work out.
Yeah, because you spent how long have you spent of your career studying PEMF?
Well, let me tell you. Since 1996, I've been working. I had worked with NASA then in 1996, and that's back when I thought it was BS and I didn't think it really worked. And then the data tells you otherwise. If you use it in a certain range, a certain way, it works every single time, and it has effects on gene expression and inflammation, all kinds of things. We just don't know why. But that's true for most medicines. I mean, they tell you what drug effects, and they try to tell you why things work. They're still discovering things about why aspirin works. I mean, you know, it's not that we have a full understanding of these things. So anybody who tries to give you the impression that they've got it all figured out, they're just lying to you.
We're going to take a quick commercial break. When we come back, we have more. Stay tuned. We have questions. We'll get up here. We'll get everybody's questions answered. Stay tuned.
Men and women, you've heard about hormone optimization. Do you feel like it's something you want to look into? RenewLifeRx.com is the place to start. Their doctors can help you with the solutions. RenewLifeRx.com has a simple process for lab work, consultation, and taking a deep dive into where your hormone levels can be improved. Superhuman Radio listeners get 30% off your initial lab work and consultation. Go to RenewLifeRx.com to schedule your no-obligation phone consultation today. Feel younger, get in better shape, and be more productive at RenewLifeRx.com.
I love beef. And if you love beef, listen up. I've discovered the best tasting beef in the world, and that's not an exaggeration, at Piedmontese.com. The Piedmontese breed is famous from Italy for being lean and unbelievably tender with half the fat calorie traditional beef. Even typically tough cuts are tender when it comes from the Piedmontese cows. And for the first time ever, Piedmontese cows are being raised here in the USA. Get 2 free 10-ounce New York strips when you purchase $50 or more at Piedmontese.com with code SHR. Go to Piedmontese.com and use code SHR today. You will never eat any other type of beef ever again. Ever wish there was a precise way to gauge your recovery from workout to workout, or wonder if the money you're spending on your nutritionals are actually improving brain function? Maybe you're aging and you're noticing some changes in memory. Wouldn't being able to really test your brain be of great value? Well, now you can with great accuracy with the Brain Gauge. The Brain Gauge lets you test essential components of brain health and track your brain health history, and all in the comfort of your own home. Go to gaugeyourbrain.com and use code SHR for $150 off this amazing device. That's gaugeyourbrain.com and SHR for $150 off. You've heard about blood flow restriction training since 2006 on SHR, but you're still on the fence. Well, here's the push. BFR is more effective at building muscle than anabolic steroids. That's right, I went there, but it's because it's the truth. My experience with the Be Strong blood flow restriction system is proof to me, and now I'm asking myself why I waited so long. You'll see undeniable changes in the targeted muscles in days and weeks like nothing you've ever tried before. I will never stop using them. Give Be Strong a try. Go to bestrong.training/super-human and use code SHR for 10% off. Whether your goal is to build muscle or burn fat, you'll find everything you need at Redcon One. Need help getting a good night's sleep? Try Fade Out, or the most popular pre-workout supplement on the market today, Total War. Sign up for their new Transformation Challenge and win $10,000, or shop for apparel that people at the gym will know that you are serious about your training. Need a testosterone booster that works? Check out Boomstick. Whatever you need, you'll find the best quality supplements on the market at Redcon One. Go to redcon1.com. That's REDCON, the number 1.com, or go to superhumanradio.net and click the Redcon One banner ad today.
This is the Superhuman Channel. Evolution just got kicked up a notch.
Welcome back. So Rigo
Carl,
Vargas has a good question. Yes.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I had one thing. I was doing some more push-ups, and there's something I kind of need to say to get closure, if that's okay. I need about 1 minute. If that's all right.
Sure.
So you were talking earlier about using the TV set to kind of measure your reaction time, right? And how you're faster than the average because they study these things, and how long does it take a person to press the button, and then how far do they need to wind back before they start the videos again, right? And that kind of thing is good for maintaining your awareness of your, it's a good thing for maintaining your awareness of your reaction time, but it doesn't give you a number, and it's very variable. And what Mark Tommerdahl was talking about last time we were on here, just a few minutes ago, was reaction time variability. Not just your reaction time, but how variable it is, and using that variability as a measure of your attention. So let me make a comment as an engineer nerd. You have got to have a tool that's specifically designed to measure these things, and you cannot just use a cheap online service. You can't even use your basically your computer. You can't use what we call commodity grade electronics. And here is why. This is something that everybody needs to know. You can't just get the free online reaction time test thing, because your TV set, your remote, and especially your computer and especially your tablet, these devices are not designed to measure your performance. They're actually designed to give you the illusion that you're performing well. Just like you said about how when you press the button and they rewind, that gives everybody the illusion that they're responding quickly enough to see the show they want to see.
Right.
That's built in. So let me tell you, every single thing on your computer is that way. Your mouse, the overhead on your operating system, on your tablet, the touch screen. This stuff is all built to add in the illusions of performance that aren't there. So you cannot, by definition, you can't use these devices to measure your performance, because they're designed to do just the opposite. So that's why,
like when you get a new iPhone and it tells you tap here, it's taking into account that you're off, because it learns how off you are and builds that into the correction.
That's right. So these things correct for your performance deficits to give you the illusion that they're smooth and that you're performing well. And you can't use these to measure your performance because they're designed to fool you. Okay? So you've got to use a tool that's designed to not fool you, to give you the straight number. And that's what a brain gauge is. And just because it looks like a computer mouse, let me tell you, it doesn't work like one. It's got its own computer
I was trying
inside.
to find the picture. I can't find the picture in it, but it looks like a mouse.
It's easy to
It really
find.
does.
You just type in, brain gauge, search that. It looks just like a computer mouse, but it's not. It's got its own very high speed internal computer. It's like a laboratory inside of itself that bypasses it just bypasses all of these things that are built into computers and tablets and keyboards and everything that are made. They're designed to deceive you into thinking that it's working smoothly when you are not performing well and it's not performing well. But what our device does is it directly measures your performance.
Yeah, it's unforgiving.
So
your device is unforgiving.
It's totally unforgiving, and there's no, as far as I know right now, there's no substitute. Anything else, where you're using an online cognitive test or anything like that, you're literally using a machine that is designed to fool you into believing something that just ain't true. So I just felt like the two things you guys said needed to tie them together with the reality that if this is something you want to measure, you got to have the right tool.
You can go to gaugeyourbrain.com to see the device too. And while you're there, take advantage of the $29.95 deal. There's nothing like it on the internet. Well, I want to get Rigo Vargas's question in here. It's about nootropics. He says there's a lot to talk about nootropics. I've read about anacetam, mushroom blends, and canatine troches or troches, depending on what part of the country you're. Is there any credence to these biohacks? Do they really work? Have you guys tested any of these with the brain gauge?
Some people that have brain gauges have tested them. I'm not familiar with a lot of these, but I know they've done some types of mushrooms. But the only way to really tell about all this stuff is to test yourself, get a baseline. And maybe the mushrooms help, but maybe too many mushrooms makes you even worse. You just don't know. And it really depends on where you are. If your brain's at 100%, you want to keep it there. And, taking some kind of nootropic may or may not push you up to 110%, which is really hard to do. But, if the only way to do it is to measure. I mean, I can't emphasize that enough. It's, that's a tried and true method. This is that we've talked to a lot of people who've done stuff. Some people, they do their own personal experiments on
this themselves. Is the thing that's absolutely true. For anything like that, Carl, the answer is test it and see. Right? You have to.
We love to say that medicine. We finally come to the conclusion that medicine is very individual, but somehow supplements aren't. It's like it's all individual.
Totally.
You got to try it. It may work for me. It may not work for you. You have to try it. Things that we do know affect the brain are dietary regimens. High carbohydrate diets.
Right. And the last comment. Yeah. The comment before was about GABA agonists, and somebody was using GABA agonists and said, they prefer something else to that GABA agonist. And it's like, well, you really don't know. You might feel better taking one thing than another, but how do you really know that anything works unless you measure? It's just a shot in the dark. Taking different drugs is, you really need to have some kind of measurement for how you do it. I mean, we used to, when I was a competitive swimmer, we used to keep a journal on how fast we went and what our diet was. That has a huge effect. What was your training regimen? What was your diet? Oh, and we could measure how fast we went. But, if you want to see what the effects of different nootropics or GABA agonists, then you really need to measure and to keep a journal. Well, the brain gauge does that for you. The brain gauge will actually keep the journal for you. So
yeah, you have to enter the nootropics and stuff you're taking. It keeps a journal of your performance, but you have to enter. There's a place where you can enter information about what you're doing, right? I mean, you can journal right on it.
Right.
So, yeah, it's very individual.
You can see the direct effects then. Yeah.
Yeah, some people are going to have a deficiency that they can correct with a supplement, and they might see an improvement. Other people might not have that deficiency, and they could take the supplement and they don't get any gain, right? It's totally individual.
Okay, last question, because everybody's all crazy about 5G. I know for a fact that RF affects us. We live in a soup of RF. And there's plenty of evidence that it's affecting us on a cellular level. There are studies that show that cilia on cells act like antenna. Depending on the frequency, that 100 wavelength number seems to be adaptable. What do you think about as we go into these higher and higher? 6 gigahertz is next, the low side of 5G. 24 to 60 is the high side of 5G. We see studies that show taking a cell phone call within a half hour of bedtime causes a greater degree of deep sleep latency. We know that it affects sperm motility. We know these things. What do you think about the brain and all the RF that we live in? Dr. Dennis, this is your wheelhouse too.
Well, once again, I'd have to say it's one of these things that doesn't get studied enough. And a lot of people will run these studies and they'll get a result, and then a lot of it's irreproducible. A lot of times they'll do a study and they'll say, well, there was no detectable harm. And then the next time the same lab runs the same study doing the same thing, they get a different result. So it's actually very hard to do safety studies. In fact, it's impossible to say anything is safe. You can't, because you can't test every possible mechanism of harm. So you have to weigh the advantages of something like 5G with the potential biological harm. And in my opinion, it's that there has been a lot of industry pressure and money to open up these wavelengths for use for communication. And this is like not a new thing. If you actually go and you look at the bands being used by 5G, a lot of those interleave with the same frequency bands as 4G. It's just a different protocol. Okay. So it's not that the carrier frequencies are necessarily different. It's that it's a different communication protocol that's more efficient in some ways. And the thing is that it's not been well characterized, the biological safety of these things. And this is really actually nothing new, because there used to be a lot of very different frequencies used by the military for communications at very high power levels that nobody ever was even told. And they just became part of our environment. We didn't even know about it. They were secret things, right? And the Russians were blasting stuff out very high power for a long time. And there's been some harm done by this. My opinion is that it doesn't get nearly enough funding. It doesn't get nearly enough study. And I would say there are almost certainly bands in the frequency spectrum that should be not used when they show biological harm. When we can show that they're harmful, and they're probably not necessarily the highest frequencies. They may resonate with something. Resonance is kind of a dodgy subject.
I was just going to say, I remember when one time we had to get a permit to build a tower, actually a transmitter room on Mount Potosi at the 8,000-foot deck for a paging transmitter.
Yeah.
And one of the studies we had to order was a harmonic study.
Yep.
All the frequencies that were up there, once we added ours, and it was always the odd number, right? It was the third, the fifth, the seventh harmonics. What happens is these frequencies combine through a phenomenon called constructive interference, and they create a residual frequency that there isn't even a transmitter up there for. But because they're all oscillating side by side, they create other frequencies.
That's right. Yeah, so you get these things that are all beat frequencies, and when two frequencies are very close together, they'll be like whoa, 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 whoa.
Heterodyne. They make that heterodyne. Yeah,
that's right. That's exactly right.
That's how your radar detector works. When they used to use, I think they still do, but when that radar frequency hit, it was called a superheterodyne, because there were frequencies in there that when yours hit it, when the radar detector hit it, it made the sound like a cat squeak, and it was like, oh, radar detector.
So this stuff is all it is all rocket science. It's all pretty complicated math and everything, but it's just the biology of these electromagnetic fields, is, in my opinion, has not been thoroughly studied. So I think the answer is, yeah, we ought to put the brakes on some of these things and study them more carefully. And we're going to find that there are some harmonics that we need to avoid, some frequencies and resonances we just need to avoid.
I have a theory, Dr. Dennis. You ready for it? The higher
Always ready.
the higher your metal deposition on a cellular level, higher iron deposition, higher copper deposition, the more you are an antenna, the more you interact with these things. Possibly harm could be in that. That might be the missing variable that no one's. That's why they get different results, different things.
I can actually tell you. I did some research for a company in the area. Long story short, they were looking for iron nanoparticles. So these are much bigger than just ionic iron or something that an actual nanoparticle that was like, sub-micron in size, but they could put them inside of platelets and then use those platelets as a magic bullet. And my job was to find the resonances at which I could put, and it was basically microwave radiation level, a couple gigahertz.
Right.
So we're already in there, and you could use that, and man, it would cook. The idea was that these nanoparticles could be basically adhered to the side of a tumor cell, like a magic bullet with these treated platelets.
And they would basically attenuate.
You heat them up with low-level microwave radiation and heat up the tissue. And boy, I'll tell you, I did some experiments that resulted in some fairly impressive pyrotechnics. So, they can pick up energy and resonate, but it's a very complicated thing. And most of the time it doesn't work, but when it does work, you can, oftentimes what'll happen is that energy will get absorbed by like a nano or sub-nano particle, and then it'll be re-radiated through what's called Neal relaxation. It's all electromagnetism, and it re-radiates sort of as heat and different things that are less damaging to the body. But then again, focal heat can be very damaging. That's what we're trying to use to kill tumors, right?
So Dr. Tommerdahl, let's wrap the show up with this here. Scott Lawler has a question. He tuned in late. So let's summarize. What exactly does the brain gauge measure?
All right. Okay. So in the easiest way to think about it is that we'll start with the overall score that you get from the brain gauge, which is a combination of a number of tests, is somewhat analogous to blood pressure. I mean, it tells you basically how well the brain is doing. Now, how does it get that? It does that through specific measures. One gives you something about like information processing speed, and attention or focus. Another thing it measures is accuracy. That is how well does the brain contrast enhance inputs. In other words, you get inputs to the brain, and the brain will actually process those inputs and look at how well it can differentiate between two things. So, if you're of the age where you had a contrast knob on the television set and you could turn that contrast knob and see things sharpen up, that's what your brain does with information that it gets. So how well does it measure that? Another part is connectivity. How well are different parts of the brain connecting? And one part that we look at is the frontal parietal cortex. How well are the frontal lobes working? Another is how well is the cerebellum doing? So that's really more like a coordination measure. Cerebellum does a lot of things looking at, and coordinating timing between different areas like sensory motor cortex and vestibular cortex. So, it does a lot of things there. But basically it takes different mechanisms of information processing, things that we've been working on since, the 1980s, 1990s, and looks at those and extracted measures for those and compiles them in something in a very comprehensive overall brain health score.
So there you go. And you can get one for $29.95, and it doesn't get better than that. This device does the same things that hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of lab equipment does, but you do it at your kitchen table or in your living room, wherever you want. You can test everything. You can test how well you slept. You can test whether or not meditation is working for you. You can test your nootropics and save bundles of money of buying things that don't really work for you. You can test your brain. For the first time,
Right. Let me interject one other thing that we did. We should have probably brought up before. We actually looked at PEMF, pulse electromagnetic field, on TBI subjects, and had a very positive effect. And that's written up and will be in some of that's actually in our Journal of Science and Medicine. So anyway, just wanted
we have
that one in.
Well, we have
you're just a basic
edit.
aging person. I'm sorry. Go ahead. I'm sorry. There's
I was
a
just
little
going to say,
latency.
if people have a little bit more technical questions, they can check our journal, which is JOSAM, Journal of Science and Medicine.org, and we go into technical detail on these things at great length.
And I, regardless of who you are, if you're a mom at home and you think that you've got an autoimmune disorder, you want to make sure that your brain is functioning, and you could use your brain function as a guide to resolving some of your problems, autoimmune disorders, whatever. Your brain can't tell what it wants and what it doesn't want. You just start to notice symptoms. So this is the way to guide your brain to better health, by measuring it. There's never been anything like this before, ever, anywhere, where you could precisely measure your brain function at home on multiple levels, and keep track of it, and look at the things you do, and look at how they affect your brain. It's wonderful. Everybody should have one. And $29.95. Come on, you buy a supplement every month for $30 that doesn't do anything for you, and you'll find that out when you get the brain gauge and you test your brain.
That's right.
So,
find the one supplement that's not working for you, pitch it out, and that'll pay for your brain gauge. There you go.
There's your brain gauge money. There it is. So you're not spending extra money, you're saving money. There you go. So go to the website gaugeyourbrain.com and pick up your brain gauge for $29.95. No contract. Cancel whenever you want, and it doesn't get any better than that, and that's exclusively for my audience. I want to thank you guys for being here today.
Always
been
pleasure,
fun.
Carl.
I'd love to come and visit. Come and visit your lab, Dr. Dennis. It looks like someplace I used to work.
Oh, really? Because it's kind of modeled after the artificial intelligence lab at MIT. I used to have a lab there, and it's kind of just a big mess. Looks like somebody let off a bomb with a bunch of resistors and stuff. So you're welcome if you're ever in. Oh, yeah. It's filled with that kind of stuff. So if you're ever in central North Carolina, just give us a ring and we'll give you a tour of the lab.
Real quick. Can you ship outside the country? What's the deal if somebody wants to get this from another country?
Yeah. We ship outside the country. Yeah.
Okay, so there you go, Ivo. Ivo lives outside the United States.
We have brain gauges all over the world. So that's
Ivo
not
was
an
a
issue.
master biohacker. And I'm very jealous of his lifestyle, just for the record. But he is going to probably love this unit, and I'm sure I'll get feedback from him on that. All right, guys, thanks so much. We're going to take one quick commercial break. When we come back, I'm going to talk about two things. I'm going to talk about my experiment with glycine and my experiment with the new peptide GHK-cu. Stay tuned, and I will see you on the other side of this commercial break. How you like that? A little humor. We'll be right back. I love beef. And if you love beef, listen up. I've discovered the best tasting beef in the world, and that's not an exaggeration, at Piedmontese.com. The Piedmontese breed is famous from Italy for being lean and unbelievably tender, with half the fat and calories of traditional beef. Even typically tough cuts are tender when it comes from the Piedmontese cows. And for the first time ever, Piedmontese cows are being raised here in the USA. Get 2 free 10-ounce New York strips when you purchase $50 or more at Piedmontese.com with code SHR. Go to Piedmontese.com and use code SHR today. You will never eat any other type of beef ever again. Imagine if you had a digital twin, one that you could compare your own health and fitness outcomes to, one that showed you whether or not the things you're doing, food you're eating, or drinks you're drinking are actually working for you or against you. Well, now you can. The the first ever advanced epigenetic saliva test that compares 20 million different data points of your DNA to help predict what is aging you faster or keeping you younger is being introduced to my audience at a 70% discount from the normal price. Go to seeds.md/epigenetic-test today to learn how to get your own digital twin that will help you take the steps to live longer and stay stronger. Don't wait, because this is a limited time offer not available anywhere else. Once these tests are gone, they're gone. Again, go to seeds.md/epigenetic-test today to learn more.
New Mass Pro Synthogen X2 just upped its own legendary game. To distance itself even further from the rest of the pack, Synthogen X2 now has double the key active ingredients. If you've ever wondered what steroid-like recovery feels like, Synthogen X2 delivers. See why others compare it favorably to powerful bodybuilding drugs at synthogen.com. Mass Pro Synthogen. When you train with it, you'll gain with it.
Hey, this is Carl. For 14 years, you've heard me talk about Can-C eye drops, and they being the reason that I do not need reading glasses at now 61 years old. But I regularly get emails and messages from people who've been using Can-C and having some amazing results. Recently, I got an email from a fella named Chad, who, because he was on dexamethasone eye drops for over 6 months, developed a cataract. Can-C eye drops actually reduced my cataract to the point where even my doctor has a hard time finding it. I will never stop using Can-C eye drops twice a day. I've been using them since 2008, he says. And you should be too. There is no better way to keep your eyes healthy and seeing clearly than Can-C eye drops. Go to wisechoicemedicine.com today and get on board, and we will both be looking into the future with very clear vision. Do you remember those delicious toaster pastries you had when you were a kid? You know, the rectangular sugar-filled snacks? Well, guess what? Legendary Foods has just made low-carb toaster pastry. This is the first of its kind, and honestly, these things are amazing. They have 3 to 4 net carb, less than 1 gram of sugar, and 9 grams of protein. You can eat them right out of the wrapper or lightly toast them. The only question is, which flavor, strawberry or brown sugar cinnamon? They're available at eatlegendary.com and Amazon.
Spit that out right now. This is the Superhuman Channel.
Welcome back. So if you've been listening to my show for any length of time, you've heard me say the good thing about some supplements is that they work. The bad thing about some supplements, those same supplements, is they work. And I learned a lesson. So I've been preaching to people to use glycine before bed for, I don't know, maybe 6, 7 years, maybe longer. And I've always said 3 grams of glycine at bed, 3 grams of glycine at bed, no more. You don't need more than that. But recently, I have been taking high doses of glycine, and my logic was I eat a lot of muscle meat, high in methionine. We know that glycine blunts the aging effects of methionine. So I figured, well, I eat, on an average day, I eat 300 grams of protein, a pound of beef, a pound of turkey, and I'm doing real carnivore right now. I'm doing strict carnivore. And so I thought, well, I got to up my glycine. I upped my glycine about maybe a month and a half ago. I started taking probably 15, I was measuring 10 grams in the beginning, and then I just got sloppy and I just started pouring it in the bottom of the cup. And I put a little magnesium citrate powder in there. It has a nice lemony fizz taste. It's a great drink. I take it right before bed. I fall asleep easy. I sleep all night. But I started noticing something about a month and a half ago. When I would wake up in the middle of the night, I usually wake up once a night to go pee. When I was waking up in the middle of the night, the room was spinning. It's like, what's this about? And when I got up to go to the bathroom, I was like really wobbly. What's this? Uh-oh, my brain is aging. And I really thought it was multiple sclerosis. In fact, I'm still going to have a brain scan in the next couple of weeks just to make sure I don't have any lesions on my brain. But I started looking at and connecting the dots of everything I do. I'm like, man, I'm off balance in the morning. I just bought a motorcycle. Like, I don't want to be off balance and start riding a motorcycle after 40 years because I'm gonna kill myself. And so I took this very seriously. And like a good biohacker, I started looking at everything I did, everything. And little by little, I just started taking stuff out of the equation. But I kept using high doses of glycine, probably 15, 20, even 25 grams in one shot before bed. And then, of course, 3 milligrams of melatonin, a little alpha ketoglutarate for the arginine alpha ketoglutarate, more for the alpha ketoglutarate than the arginine because of its anti-aging effects, and my magnesium powder. I started thinking about it. I kept taking things out of the equation, and all of a sudden, I thought, man, I take more glycine now than I've ever done before. I wonder if it could be that. So I just started looking at the research on glycine. Well, glycine profoundly increases GABA, profoundly. In fact, glycine, gram for gram, produces more GABA in the brain than just taking GABA. And some of the symptoms of high GABA are loss of balance. And I complained. I used to say, I wake up in the morning, my brain just feels tired. It's literally, I would say, my brain feels tired. I feel like my brain is exhausted. My body's ready to go, but my brain is exhausted. So a couple nights ago, I stopped taking any glycine. And sure enough, my balance is coming back. It's going to take a week probably because of the bioaccumulation effect. But my balance is coming back. And I feel better. And I'm waking up feeling refreshed. And I'm thinking, we take it for granted. All of us out, look, man, I've been abusing drugs since I was a kid. The drugs changed, but my abusive behavior hasn't changed. The drugs used to be recreational drugs. You name it, I took it. The only thing I never did was inject heroin, but I snorted a lot. I snorted a lot of Mexican brown heroin. And so fast forward to now my addiction is with my supplements, and I overdo them just like an addict does. I cut the glycine out. My balance is back. I'm sharp again. I don't need caffeine in the morning to wake up. I feel great. So lesson, I've been telling people only take 3 grams before bed, but I did not follow my own advice, which is typical of people like me. I'll tell you what to do, but I'm not doing it. I'm doing my own thing. So now I've cut glycine out, and I will introduce glycine back in maybe in 4 or 5 months. I'm sleeping good right now, so I don't feel any need for it. But I may introduce it again, but I'm only going to take my own advice, and I'm never going to use more than 3 grams. So there you go. That's a lesson learned I want to share with you. Now, I started using GHK-cu. Got 2 pictures of the vial up there. It's from Peptide Science. If you use the code SHR, you'll get 10%. So most of you know that I have been suffering with some autoimmune disorders, and that's why I've gone strict carnivore. I want to get rid of it. And the reality is that after doing the show with Dr. Yurt the other day and talking about GHK-cu and then starting to read the studies, I realized, holy crap, like the science is amazing on this. The science is amazing on this. And the science has been reproduced by other labs. You want the copper bonded, the copper chelated GHK, because they compared supplemental copper and taking GHK with copper, and they found out that even if the GHK leaches copper from the albumin, which is what it does, using the chelated form has a greater effect on DNA modifications that are great. I mean, this peptide affects so many genes, turning bad ones off and good ones on. So one of the supposed effects of GHK-cu is pain relief. I live with terrible pain in my legs, lower legs, my feet, my glutes, and it's a burning sensation. It's almost like I ran 100 miles and ended up with lactic acid buildup in my muscles. My sister suffered from it too. They misdiagnosed her as having Parkinson's disease, and she was already crippled at my age. So I know I'm doing better. And once I start training again, when I train, it doesn't bother me at all. It goes away. But I haven't trained in 2 months, so it's really gotten vicious. I took 2.5 milligrams of GHK-cu last night at 6 p.m. after my last meal. And within a half hour, I felt the pain go away in my lower body, like that fast. So I thought it was a fluke. So I did it again this morning. So this morning, I got up, jumped in the shower, got out of the shower, gave myself a shot. Literally, the pain that I was walking around with, like in a half hour, it just gets dulled. Plus, I felt relaxed. I felt like I was in the zone, is all I can say. I felt good, like I was driving to work. Somebody at the grocery store I ran into, we talked for a little while. I was just like feeling great. And I keep thinking it's that. I'm going to be doing 5 milligrams a day. So I'm doing 2.5 milligrams in the morning, and I'm going to do 2.5 milligrams later in the day. I get plenty of zinc in my diet. I don't need to supplement with zinc. Scott Lawler said, be sure to supplement with zinc. I'm going to eat a pound of beef. I eat a pound of beef every day. I've already eaten a pound of ham today. I'll be eating a pound of turkey after the show. I get so much zinc in my diet. And I get a lot of copper in my diet. So I'm not looking for this to increase copper. And that's what the research shows. Even in the face of adequate copper levels, this peptide bound to copper is magic. It's much better than just the GHK by itself. And I'll be posting some studies in the next couple days as I dig through them that I think of a great value. But look at the pretty color. Isn't that beautiful? It's a beautiful sapphire blue. So what I did was I took this 50 milligram GHK and I added 2 milliliters of bacteriostatic sodium chloride solution. And so every 10 units is 2.5 milligrams. And I will be doing 5 milligrams a day moving forward. And I'll see if it actually continues to work at that dose. And then I'll probably cut back to 2.5. GHK also interesting for its increasing in decorin, okay, which inhibits myostatin. And that's not why I'm saying. When you look at, Scott, when you look at the research on this peptide, it almost seems too good to be true. But there's such a body of work on it. I mean, it's just amazing the number of people that have studied it and seen the benefits of it, that you go to yourself, holy crap, like this could actually be the one peptide that everybody should be using. It's pleiotropic. When you can accurately use the word pleiotropic when describing the benefits of this peptide, really. But so I'll keep everybody posted on what I'm noticing from it. But I'm excited how I feel already after using it. This is my second day. Technically, my first shot was yesterday at 6 p.m. I had a shot this morning at 7 a.m. I'll have another shot when I get home. I'm very excited about this. And don't forget, it has effects on autoimmunity. People with multiple sclerosis see great benefits from using it. I have 1 gram coming. It's underrated compound. Yeah, you're right. Is yours the copper chelated or is it just GHK? I'm just curious. And then did I see? Let's see. So another thing that Scott Lawler contributed is that the average person needs 15 grams a day. Body can make its own. He's talking about the glycine. I was overdoing it. I use it as a sweetener in drinks. I use it as a sweetener before I went full on carnivore. I was using it as a sweetener in my oatmeal in the morning. I was probably easily getting 30 grams a day ongoing for the past month and a half. But Scott McNally was watching. I just saw this, my pal. Those of you who know Scott McNally, he is the guy behind the Get Big Network, and he does some amazing bodybuilding shows. Great guy. I got to hang out with him, not this past year, but the year before at the Arnold. Great guy, hardworking guy, brilliant guy. Yeah, he said proper GHK-cu. Good for you, man. I'm really, I hope you message me after using it for a week and tell me what you think of it. I got to tell you, this isn't placebo. The pain in my legs gone is not a placebo. I can't imagine that away. I never have. So, hey, he's still here. I thought maybe he just popped in. Nice to see you. Thank you so much, brother. All right, so look, that's all I've got to report today. I'll keep everybody up to date about my experiment with the GHK. Again, if you want to get some, you can go to peptidesciences.com. If you use the code SHR, you'll save 10% off your order. Show them some love. They're good people. They have high-quality peptides, and they ship pretty much anywhere in the world. I hear people in Australia going, well, I can't get this in Australia. Yeah, you can. Go to peptidesciences.com. Check it out. All right, so that's it for today. We'll see everybody tomorrow with more Superhuman Radio. Please share the show. Help us get more people involved in taking care of themselves. Here, wait. Ivo Sue says, when you don't weigh glycine, it's easy to overdo because it looks so little by weight a lot. Yeah, you're right. Because it's like sugar. It's like sugar crystals. It's like sugar crystals. I don't even think a level teaspoon. I think a level teaspoon is more than 5 grams. So I'm telling you, I was getting stupid amounts every single day. Stupid amounts. And it killed my brain. I mean, I thought I had something wrong with me. I asked Dr. Yurth to help me out and order a Tesla 3 brain scan because I was worried I had full-blown MS. But now it's gone away since I stopped the glycine. I'm going to give it another week to clear out of my system. All right, look. Thank you for being here. Thank you for participating. Please share the show. We'll see everybody tomorrow with more Superhuman Radio.